Hi, Jason.
Mary? Good evening, Ms. Farmer.
Oh, that's better. Hello.
Well, it is 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this study session of the Lakewood City Council to order. Reminder that we are operating under the extended exceptions, special conditions to the Open Public Meeting Act. So there is internet access to the public, but obviously no one in person. And we move to the first item of business, which is a legacy plan update. And just a reminder, remember the importance of the legacy plan is if it's not in there, you can't get a grant for it. So Mr. Caulfield, who's lead on this?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. It will be our Senior Policy Analyst, Shannon Kelly Fong, along with our Park and Recreation Director, Mary Dodsworth. So with that, I will turn it over to them.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. I'm joined this evening by our Parks and Recreation and Community Service Director, Mary Dodsworth. And we are here tonight to review the Legacy Plan. The Legacy Plan is the city's park, recreation, and open space master plan. The document is a 6-year strategic plan that acts as a guide to help the city meet future park and recreation needs of the community. As part of this, the plan is designed to support grant applications, in particular the requirements of the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. It's important to note that the plan does not commit the city to any set course of action or funding. Rather, it's a springboard for future city actions. The Parks Capital Facility Plan, the PCFP, which is really hard to say, is one element of this document. It's a capital improvement wish list for the next 6 years. And you can find that in the draft plan that you have on page 210. So the version of the draft plan that was uploaded in tonight's agenda packet had some conversion issues, which resulted in some content being deleted or rearranged. So the version you received earlier, as well as the one that can be accessed currently on the city's website, is the one that is up to date and has all of the content. So I'm going to start, share my screen here, and I've got a short presentation for you. So the updated draft legacy plan, which is in front of you, has updated acknowledgements, table of content, acronyms, abbreviations, a glossary. It also has a preface, which was previously reviewed by the City Council at a previous study session on the updates. And the preface, again, provides that quick overview of key elements that you'll find in the draft legacy plan, including, very briefly what the vision, mission, motto, and goals of the draft update or of the legacy plan are. It also has chapter 1, which kind of takes you into a deeper dive into the plan. It provides more details on all of the elements that you will find in the plan. Especially, it provides a full list of goals, policies, and action items. And this starts on page 1 of the draft update. Chapter 2 consists of a community profile. So this really is to kind of give the context of where Lakewood is. So it reviews, things like where the city actually is, what its size is, history, what kind of weather patterns you see, and then also demographics. This starts on page 41 of the draft update. Chapter 3 includes a demand and needs analysis. This is where we looked at everything that was going on regionally. We looked on things nationally, and then we also looked really close to home. We did a multi-pronged engagement event through the spring of 2019 through the summer. And we went out and we got a lot of comments. We went out into the community during events, and we also held things like focus groups and surveys online to get a lot of community inputs on what people wanted to see in the parks recreation here in the city. As part of Chapter 3 and the demands and need analysis, we also included an updated level of service analysis. We talked about this in length during our last update session, but in this plan, we have 2 level of services. So one is the walkshed level of service, which is similar to the walkshed level of service that was provided in the last draft with a few changes. In this one, it's all Lakewood addresses are within a 10-minute walk of a publicly accessible park or open space facility. And then we also added the park amenity condition assessment, also known as the PACA. And part of the PACA is a quality score, which is where we went out and we scored all of the amenities found in parks on a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being poor, 2 being fair, and 3 being good. And then we averaged all the scores for all of the amenities found in each park and then across the entire park system. The second part of the PACA score is the diversity score. So this was how many and different types of amenities did each park have. So again, it used a score of 1 to 3. And so if you had a score of 1, you had very few amenities. And if you had a score of 3, you had a lot of amenities, but in particular, you had a lot of common amenities as well as active muscle-powered amenities. So if you want to look at Chapter 3, that starts on page 77 of the updated draft. So just to kind of highlight some of the reasons why the change in the walkshed measurement. One, it expands the criteria to include all parks and open space facilities. And then number 2, it expands the criteria so that we can provide more environments where all individuals, regardless of age, ability, can engage in unstructured activities, build social connections, and engage in civic activities. So what you're looking at now, and this is something that you have seen before in a previous study session, is the 10-minute walkshed, the first level of service. And so as part of the updated draft, what we have added is gaps in the 10-minute, potential gaps in the 10-minute walkshed. And we've also provided ways that the city could consider, working on some of those gaps, whether it would be through acquiring additional land or creating an open space facility or partnering with a variety of partners. The plan also includes some conversation on future parks and open space facilities. In particular, it highlights the downtown park as well as a potential Lakewood Station District park. What you're seeing here is that 10-minute walkshed measurement on the left-hand side is with it showing Clover Park School District elementary schools as parks, which is one of those items that the plan considers as a potential option in the future, is building that relationship and having that as an option. And then on the right-hand side, other potential future parks. So this is where you would see, for example, the downtown park or the Sounder Station Park. The maps showing on here are showing those walksheds as well, but this time they're showing it with the PACA scored. So on the left-hand side, you can see the quality PACA score, and this is currently, we ranked the parks in 2020. So again, the left-hand side is showing the quality score. So the bright pink is the higher score. And then on the right-hand side, you have the PACA diversity score with the walkshed score. And the dark blue is the higher score for the PACA diversity score. And this just shows you the 2020 Packet Diversity and Quality scores. And the reason I've highlighted a couple of items is because those are things that have been identified in the Parks Capital Facility plan as having significant improvements, in particular Edgewater Park and Wards Lake Park. To continue on, the draft updated plan has, chapter 4 is a new park inventory. And so this goes through all the park classifications, all the amenities that you can find in there, what's been done in those parks since 2014, and then what future projects could occur in those parks. And that starts on page 139. Chapter 5 likewise provides a recreation inventory, which goes over recreation guidelines and also what was current programming for the city, and that starts on page 198. Chapter 6 provides the Park Capital Facility program, and there's actually 2 of them. So one includes a 2-acre downtown park, and the second one includes a 4-acre downtown park. Other than that, the 2 are the same, and you can find that starting on page 210. There's also a discussion of future potential park projects, as well as a playground replacement schedule. The updated draft also includes a bunch of appendices, and they are listed here, and you can take a look at them starting on page 200 of the updated draft. So I'm going to minimize this. So as far as next steps, seeking council feedback on the draft plan that is before you, in particular the goals, levels of service, and Parks Capital Facility program. So
Ms. Dodsworth?
I just wanted to say that, 6 years ago, we did our first legacy plan, and it was a change in the way that we had done plans in the past, looking more strategically and looking out further into the future than just the required 5 or 6 years. So this is a great update. And first of all, super thankful that we were able to work with Shannon on this project. She brought so much technical expertise and gave us new ways of looking at information and bringing a lot more data to this plan. So I think it's really a great document to help us get started. And, we accomplished so much with our last legacy plan that we really were adding a lot of new things to this just because we were we'd done such a good job working with our community and working with council and being able to accomplish a lot. So we're excited about all of the details of this plan, even though it's quite a hefty document. But we're also looking forward to new ways of doing this. And just as a note, we all know that, we've been working on this for well over a year. And of course, a lot of this was done prior to the COVID situation that we're in. And so we do know that things are going to change. And the great thing about this plan is it's a great foundation for where we're at and where we want to go. But it also gives us the ability to be nimble and creative and make changes as we need to support our community and to support Parks and Recreation. So anyway, ready to answer your questions or clarify anything that you might have from reviewing the document.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much. I had a question, Mary and Shannon, on the capital facilities plan. I'm specifically looking at pages 248 and 249 of the packet. I had a question about the potential acquisition of the downtown park. This, of course, is something we've been chatting about for quite some period of time. My question is, the acquisition figures that we're using in the plan are high at $10 million for the phase 1 acquisition of 2 acres and the master plan and park improvement of another $5 million. So I guess I kind of wanted to know, how we kind of swag those numbers and whether or not they're realistic, because I hope the plan, even though it's just a plan, I know it's going to change, and with COVID and post-COVID, life is going to be different. But I would like to make sure that we had a really realistic number in there so that we could actually see a potential reality for the urban park in the town center. Because if we look at 10 and 5 and, you know, $15 million swing, people are going to look at that and just say that's pie in the sky, we'll never make it happen. But if it's something realistic in the $3 to $4 or $5 million, it might be something we can make happen. Did that come through?
So yeah, so while Mary's working on unmuting herself,
Yeah.
so the estimates came from the downtown plan, and they were based off of research that they had found from the city of Kirkland.
Which is wildly, as we know, different in terms of price valuation. Kirkland's probably got the most expensive real estate in the Puget Sound, to be honest. I would like to see a realistic number there because I can't imagine either in an outright purchase or maybe a public-private partnership, if we were to get RPAI to really realize how valuable it could be for us to partner with them and perhaps enter into a relationship on a ground lease or whatever to buy the Gottschalk's pad for the urban park. I can't imagine that that would be worth $10 million in my wildest dreams. So I'd like to see a more realistic number.
Any other questions? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To follow up with the mayor on with my feedback on the facilities plan and actually the entire piece about doing that. In the downtown area, I was concerned that the plan seems to minimize, even to the point of almost ignoring the Green Street Loop, which was the urban linear park that was in the downtown plan, to move to that. That it's the facilities plan indicates no anticipated work regarding developing that park, even in any phases in the first 6 years. And in the inventory of parks under urban parks, while we've included the Gravelly Lake Loop as a linear urban park, that don't identify the Green Street Loop as a linear urban park in the vision of the city. You know, I think that the plan needs to include some elements of the Green Street Loop, both in its discussions, recognizing that it is a goal and a part of the downtown as an actual linear urban park, and looking at what we might do, even if it is a minimum level of design and that would go with that sometime earlier than 6 years. You know, I think not including it is kind of ignoring the priorities that we put into the downtown plan to be able to go and do that. It is mentioned on page 114 that it was included in the downtown plan, but then the rest of the legacy plan essentially ignores it. I think that there are a couple of other things that I thought were omissions or not that at least ought to be addressed in the plan. One was the area of the prior Fort Silicon golf course that the council rezoned as open space and recreation. That's a significant acreage that in the discussion, and although we don't own it, it wasn't included in the discussions where there were discussions of acreage owned by other entities that contribute to open space and a long-term vision for doing that. And the fact that the council specifically went in to rezone that to ensure that it remained available to the community as open space speaks to it deserving some mention, even if there's not an intention of dedicating dollars in the capital facilities plan. But to include that, at least in terms of discussion. And similarly, the development, the preservation, the potential acquisition by the city of historic Fort Steilacoom. Historic Fort Steilacoom is another open space recreation asset of the community that I think deserves having some mention in the plan. Again, it's not owned by the city yet, and not able to do so, but I think given one of the purposes of the plan, in addition to qualifying for grant funding, is to be informative to the public about the open space and recreation vision for the community and things that are going on. That would be a good element to get to add some text in any event. I also thought that there was, in the discussion on Fort Steilacoom, and particularly for something that we might want to get a grant for, certainly within the next 6 years and maybe even earlier, was there was no mention about looking to get some Native American themed public art within that park. We have had discussions within the Nisqually tribe and sort of said we were trying to look to work in that direction. So, those would be some things that I'd sort of like to see addressed, if we can do an update before final approval. I had a question about the PACA rating scheme. And I understood that the 3-2-1 rating, and then averaging all the ratings that a park had. But one of the line items in the PACA system is restrooms. And where a park had no restrooms, it just didn't enter into the calculations instead of giving the park a 0, I guess, that does, whether a park has restrooms or not, I think influences amenities. That may be the only one that the lack of is a negative. But even if you put a 0 in there because there are no restrooms and recalculated the averages, it changes some things to that. Like in Springbrook Park, to say that there is a spray feature, which is, an element of the new All Abilities playground that was there when it was built that works intermittently. But to add that in as giving a 3 to in that park's calculations, whereas the lack of restrooms doesn't detract from it. Whether restrooms might be included in all parks, even if their rating for that is 0, in readjusting the PACA rating. I was surprised on page 108 of the packet that there was a statement that says health inequity is a key priority of the city. Don't deny that health inequity exists, but that to say that it's a key priority of the city, I don't necessarily think is an accurate statement, because if it was, we would be addressing it on multiple fronts, not just having healthy parks. You know, a good park system can help mitigate health inequity. But even the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department doesn't seek to take on the challenge of making health inequity a priority of their work. And I think that I would, given that this is communicating to the community, I would look to state that differently, of saying, you know, that we're looking for parks to be a mitigating factor in health inequity as it exists in the community in Pierce County, rather than saying that it's a priority for the city. I think that's a statement that's seems to extend beyond just parks, and would go off to do that. I guess the last thing that I would say is that I was surprised to see the development of the barns in the capital facilities plan scheduled for 2023 and 2024. My recollection of the last discussion council had around the concept of those renovation of the H barn was before we went ahead and looking at putting it down, of saying that we were committed to that as a project. And I understand that this is not something, as Shelley Fong said, that commits us to anything, but the fact that it is informative to the public that that is the direction that we've, you know, it's kind of implied that's the direction we'll go to. You know, the discussion around that council had, I would characterize as lukewarm, that wasn't necessarily looked as something that we would want to do. We talked about committing, I think the number was $30,000 towards a study to see if funding was feasible for it. But we also talked about the fact that big ticket of item that soon might not be well received or in the right priority. I know, I guess I'd be interested in what my colleagues think about that. So that's sort of my feedback on what I'm seeing in the draft of the plan as it's in front of us today.
Any other questions or comments?
Mayor? Oh, let Mary go.
Mrs. Moss. You have to unmute, Mary.
Now, okay.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank the staff for all the hard work they've done. I was reading through that, and there's a lot of work been put into this, and just want you to know we appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Bolke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of, I will second what Mary said. I really do appreciate that it's a very ambitious plan, but I appreciate ambition by the group that put this together, and I think that they did a very comprehensive job. I will second what Councilmember Brandstetter said. I've walked through the area that's the old golf course, and it may present some opportunities for some trails. It's a good portion next door is already actively used by the Frisbee golf guys. So, and there may be connections that we may be able to make in the future with Chambers Creek Canyon, I'm not sure. But we're also in the midst of that, working with the state on their master plan for the hospital property. So it might be a good time to at least investigate or at least start thinking about what we might want to do there. I do appreciate I do appreciate that beyond the barn restoration, there wasn't a lot in the Fort Silicon Park plan other than that, because I feel like we've done a lot of things in that park. It's very, very heavily used, and I appreciate that lights aren't in there. It's not that I oppose lights for fields, but I really do think that that presents an opportunity to talk about turf fields and lights and public use with the school district in perhaps a couple of locations where it can be used at night by the community. So so I do appreciate that, but I really do think that it was a nice plan. It's very comprehensive, and I'm hoping that we can accomplish quite a bit with it.
Any other questions, comments, council? I'd just like to echo my thanks for all the hard work. This is a very detailed, comprehensive document, even though it is a guidebook more than a commitment. It presents a lot of opportunities. I would like to make one comment on the rating system, and maybe that's adopted from somewhere else, and this isn't unique to parks. Any rating system that has 3 options and starts with a 1 isn't particularly valid, because you get an attendance credit for showing up, no matter, even if you don't have anything in that category, and it skews the math. So I always prefer to start with a 0, so you can actually flunk in a category. But that being said, this is, like I said, quite a comprehensive and detailed document that you've done a lot of work on, and hopefully we'll have some money to implement some of it someday. So thanks again. So we now move to a
Mayor,
yes.
sorry, would you like us to bring this item back for further review at another study session on May 11th, or would you like it to be brought back to be considered for adoption on May 18th?
Well, I think by silence, I think we kind of have consensus that we should throw in the Western State Hospital properties, just to make sure we have, if that opportunity in their planning process develops, that we can move on it. So maybe you can throw something in like that and bring it back for consideration.
Great, thank you.
Then we'll move on to a review of the Transportation Benefit District Annual Report.
And that will be Ms. Kraus. So she should be showing up here shortly.
Greetings, Ms. Kraus.
Good evening. Would you like me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so first item I have is the Transportation Benefit District Annual Report. This report starts on page 413. This is required by law. The city is required to issue an annual report on the status of transportation projects funded in whole or in part by TBD funds. In 2019, the city received $831,000 in TBD revenues and transferred $923,000 to eligible TBD projects. The TBD ending fund balance at the end of 2019 is $53,000, and you'll see how we're proposing to use those funds in 2020. The 2 projects that received TBD funding in 2019 are the chip seal program and the overlay of Custer Road from Southwest 88th Street to Southwest to John Dower Road. For the chip seal program, the total funding sources for this project in 2019 was $427,000, and the uses totaled $342,000, leaving $85,000, which is going to be proposed to be carried over for the 2020 carry forward. The focus of the 2019 chip seal program was on the Lake City area north of Veterans Drive and was completed in 2019. The focus for the 2020 chip seal program will be the area bounded by 108th Street and north of 112th Street to the south between Gravelly Lake Drive and Pacific Highway, including streets and active park. The second project, the overlay of the Custer Road from South 88th Street southwest to John Dower Road, the funding sources total $685,000 and included $8,000 from SWIM funds. The work on this project consisted of saw cutting, planing and paving the road surface, repairing storm drain pipes where needed, and installing wiring and cameras for improved signalization. Additional channelizing was conducted along Custer Road to improve traffic flow. The project was completed in 2019. And at the end of this project, there was $48,000, which is being returned to Transportation CIP for eligible projects that you'll see in the 2020 carry forward budget adjustment. This $48,000 is proposed to go to the minor capital and major maintenance in 2020. The 2019 annual TBD report is scheduled for adoption at the May 4th council meeting. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions for Ms. Kraus? Seeing no hands up electronically or waving. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next item, which is the review of the 2019 year-end financial report.
So the 2019 year-end financial report starts on page 420 of the council packet. But what I'm going to do is just skip over to page 423, which is the general and street fund summary. So overall, we had a fantastic year. We ended up with a good ending fund balance. So in 2019, the positive operating gap was $3.9 million, meaning operating revenues exceeded operating expenditures by $3.9 million. On the operating revenue side, compared to the 2019 budget, increased by $2.7 million or 7%. And again, this is due to conservative budgeting, which is consistent with our financial policies. Sales tax increased by $1.2 million or 11%. And compared to 2018, the increase was $977,000. $476,000 of this is due to construction, which we consider as one time. Another $335,000 is from retail trade, which is a great thing that's typically ongoing, and $109,000 from services, which included $55,000 from restaurants. Utility tax increased by $170,000 or 3%. This does include $82,000 from net proceeds of a major phone company going back a number of years. Gambling tax increased by just under $300,000 and is consistent with what we have seen the last couple of years. Permits and fees increased by $471,000. Both court fines and forfeitures, as well as camera enforcement, increased. Extra duty increased by $211,000, but it's offset by a corresponding expenditure increase. And miscellaneous revenue increased by $165,000. $77,000 of that is from the utility tax phone audit, the interest and the penalties associated with that. On the operating expenditure side, we came in at $630,000 below budget, and the one department that is over budget is community and economic development, but there is also a corresponding revenue increase. The increase on the expenditure side is for contracted plan review. So we get a corresponding revenue increase on that side. At the end of the year, ending fund balance increased by $4.5 million more than budgeted. And at the end of 2019, ending fund balance was $9.9 million, is more than sufficient to meet the general fund ending fund balance reserve. 12% was required, which equates to about $5.2 million, leaving $4.7 million or 11% that is available for the 2020 budget adjustment, as well as the 2021 and 2022 budget. As you'll see later on in the carry forward budget presentation, the budget adjustment reduces the anticipated excess ending fund balance reserves from 4.7 to 3.2 million. And the one thing I forgot to mention is on recovery ratios, both parks and community and economic development met their target. Parks came in at 45% and community and economic development came in just slightly under at 84% compared to the 85% that was adopted or expected. So that concludes my presentation on the year-end report.
Questions for Ms. Kraus? Seeing none on the scan of the screen.
Oh, hold on here. Let's see.
Sir, is that Mr. Whalen or Mr. Bulkey?
Me.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much. I had a question for Ms. Kraus about the data. As I reviewed it, seemed to me from 18 to 19, we saw kind of a reduction in the permit related activity in community and economic development. Do you have any thought as to why we saw a realistic decrease in 19?
Yes, one of the, and I don't have my report right in front of me, but in 2018, during the first quarter, I see city manager has his hands up. But the one thing that we saw in 2018 is we had a major building permit that generated quite a bit of money during the first quarter. We typically see that, and that's one of the reasons why our revenues are down. But I see city manager wanted to say something.
Actually, if I could add on to that, also 2018 was the best year that the city had ever experienced since it had incorporated in terms of development services activity. So quite frankly, that's a tough, comparing to 2018 is probably not really a good, valid approach. It looks like things are down, but actually in 2019, it was one of our higher years since incorporation as well. It was just that 2018 was really, quite frankly, in the stratosphere.
That's what I was hoping to hear, that it was an anomaly, or we were either not staffing it appropriately in 19 or activity was generally down. But from what I hear you say, 18 was just a superlative year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And 2019, quite frankly, is a very close second as well.
Yeah.
And we did add some additional staff resources in 2019 to help out at the permit counter, as well as with some processing in the back end.
I'm sure we'll ask you later, perhaps in your city manager update, about your prognostication and crystal ball for 2020, now that we've had this little blip on the screen this year. I'm sure that permit activity and construction activity will take a little bit of a dip.
All right, other question?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rolke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess added on to that comment about how much permitting occurred in 2018 was the growth in the property tax, which at 3.6%, given that we're limited to 1% and new construction, is an indication of a lot of new construction came on the books last year. I mean, that's a really strong year for the property tax. And I think really good news, because it shows that a lot of that stuff's finally hitting the books. So I don't know what it's going to be like this year, but certainly last year that looked like a real good number.
Anyone else?
So the next item I have is the 2020 carry forward budget adjustment.
Okay.
Let's move
So
to
the carry forward budget adjustment starts on page 527 of the council packet. And first off, I just want to say there are a number of items that we did not include in the proposed carry forward. One of them being the initiative 976, not the TBD revenues themselves, but the other potential impacts as it relates to the multimodal funds and the motor vehicle excise tax. We will add that once we have a better handle on what that might look like. We also did not include transportation mitigation fees. The life to date, we have about 104,000, And the plans for these monies is to first construct a new traffic signal at Avondale and Gravelly Lake Drive to include the signal coordination at Gravelly Lake Drive corridor. We have set aside those monies and it's sitting in the in the transportation CIP ending fund balance. So the monies are still there. The abatement funds, the current demolition cost, including, or the estimated demolition cost, including the asbestos removal, is $315,000 if it is not handled by the property owner. So if we were to have to pay for that, we'll be looking at the general fund, a combination of general fund and the abatement funds. The funding for the library, last year, the city council, or maybe it was the year before, allocated funding for the library sites. We did not carry this over in 2020. Instead, we returned the $210,000 balance to the general fund. Same with the Gold grant, city council approved this last year. We're not proposing to carry forward the balance, which was not spent. So we are returning $50,000 to the general fund. For the economic conditions as a result of COVID-19, you'll get to hear that directly from the city manager at the end of my presentation. In terms of ending fund balance, if the city council were to approve the budget adjustment as proposed, projected general fund ending fund balance would be $8.1 million, which is $4.9 million set aside for the 12% general fund reserves as required by the city's financial policies, leaving 3.2 million or 8% unreserved, which could be set aside for one-time purposes in the upcoming 2021-22 biennial budget, and or could be available to help mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. So there's a lot of information in the budget adjustment, as you can see. The details begin on page 532 with the summary section on page 554. I did not plan to go through each of those items as they're all detailed in the report, but there are some that I would like to highlight as it relates to the general and street fund. So for the general street fund, we do have a number of new items. And when I'm speaking about new items, I'm not including the ones that are grant funded, but just taking a look at the proposed new items, we have a total of $400,000, of which about $187,000 is ongoing and one time of $212,000. And just to name off some of them, we have the contribution to the South Sound of Housing Affordability Partnership of $5,000, a youth summit, which is almost $7,000, Lakewood Multicultural Coalition of $3,000. We have a conversion of a police vehicle for about $6,000 and replacing a John Deere mower for just under $3,000. The city council had already seen the wide format printers and scanners. That impact to the general and street fund is $26,000. We also have a transfer to the Fort Steilacoom Park barn restoration feasibility study, and the impact to the general fund there is $10,000. Also an additional $85,000 contribution to the Wards Lake CIP. We're adding we're adding $27,000 from general fund for the design and survey of Maple Street Sewer for road improvement projects. We also have speed radars that are being proposed, totaling $17,400. We're hoping that WCIA will pay for a portion of these, but because we don't know if we've been approved for the budget, we're budgeting the full amount to be funded by general and street fund. We also have guardrails, $15,000 for the deductibles. Night market as an ongoing $50,000 with a $25,000 contribution offset. We're implementing the collective bargaining implementation, and that's about $108,000 annually. We're changing the and sound transit and other parks facilities, and that to the general fund is about $5,000 impact. And then we also converted earlier this year, we converted our information technology manager to a chief information officer position, and that impact to the general fund is about $19,000. So overall, just to the general and street fund, new programs of $400,000. So that really concludes my presentation without going through other details. The next step is the public hearing, which is scheduled for May 4th and followed by adoption on May 18th. So then I'd like to turn it over to the city manager who will speak on the economic impacts of COVID-19.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Well, good evening again, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. As you've heard this evening, we ended 2019 probably the very best that we've ever ended financially, certainly in the time that I've been with the city. And that would have placed us, or has placed us, in such a good positive position as we looked out into the next biennium for 21 and 22. Unfortunately, we have this little thing called COVID-19, which is kind of put us back on our heels a little bit, actually quite a bit. I think one of the things to remember is that, even today, quite frankly, there's more questions than answers regarding what the financial impact of COVID-19 is going to be on our city's finances. What we do know for sure is it's not going to be good. It's probably going to be quite bad. I think the good news, though, is that, we have a team here. This is not, quote unquote, our first rodeo. Many of us have, but we were through the financial crisis from 10 years ago, the downturn of the economy post 9/11, the Russian financial crisis of the late 90s, and a couple of smaller and minor recessions in the early 1990s, and then everything in between, to include I-695 and a number of other initiatives and things along those lines that have had a negative impact on local government finances. I think, as you probably know, I tend to look at things as being, having the glass being half full as opposed to half empty. At the same time, we do need to be prepared for the worst, if you will. Ta right now, she is working through the specifics of what we think the financial impact in terms of lost revenue in 2020 is going to be. At a 30,000 foot level, based on what we know today, coupled with, just our experiences on things like this in the past, and also depending on how long this drags out. That's really a key aspect of this as well. The lost revenue in our general fund could be, anywhere between 4 to 5 to upwards of $8 million. Now, of course, the latter top of that would be, again, that this really continues out through the summer and into the early fall. But likewise, as I started off with, there's more questions than answers. It could be worse, it could be less. We hope to know in the next week or two a little bit more information in terms of what that number actually looks like. But if you look at our major revenue sources, it really comes to light quite quickly how those numbers could very easily add up to that dollar amount, that range that I just gave you. Property taxes, typically, we collect 99.9%. Well, there's going to be, the assessor treasurer is also already, allowing people not to pay their property taxes or to delay them. So very easily, there could be a loss of property taxes measured, maybe not in the millions, but certainly in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2020. Sales tax, the big ticket item, basically March, April, and May at this point in time are lost months. When we're presuming that the governor is not going to fully open the economy on May 5th. So that's why I say May is, kind of a lost month as well. Gambling tax, we usually collect about $4 million, $3.5 million a year. Well, they're just not open. And if they're not open, they're not paying any gambling taxes. So very quickly, you're looking at $1 million or $2 million in that revenue source alone. Admissions tax, $500,000 a year. That's primarily from our theaters. Really no news on when the theaters will open. That could be later this summer. It could be in the fall. Even when they do open, are people going to want to go to the theaters? So our admissions tax is going to take a significant help. And then we have our consumption-based revenue sources, such as state shared revenue, fuel tax, liquor taxes. Those are the two big ones. Well, there's not a lot of traffic on the road, not a lot of people driving. Same thing with, liquor profits and liquor excise taxes. So that's going to take a hit. Another one is utility taxes, one of our major revenue sources. Perhaps Comcast will see an increase because a lot of people staying home watching movies and the like. But generally speaking, again, consumption based. I think the best we can hope for there is that, things hold their own. Though again, a lot of utilities are providing their customers an opportunity to either not pay or delay their payments. Even fines and forfeitures, we're not writing a lot of traffic tickets. So again, you look at those revenue sources and they add up relatively quickly. But again, we'll know more in the near future here. On March 3rd, I issued a directive to the department directors that they pause all general government expenditures. And of course, the big one was hiring any new staff or anything like that. So that's been in place. Subsequent to that, last week, I followed up with some more detailed direction in terms of trying to hold the line, so to speak. Not only are we going to not fill any current or vacant positions, but we're also, not going to be filling part-time or seasonal, limited term or temporary positions at this point in time. Likewise, all discretionary spending is on hold indefinitely. I'd like to point out, even in the carry forward adjustment, the carry forward of those budgeted items doesn't mean that they're going to get spent. It just means that they're there if and when the economy improves. But at this point in time, a lot of those things, we're just going to put in a holding pattern unless absolutely necessary. And then I put in the proverbial, if there's anything not covered there, you got to come talk to Ms. Kraus and I. And then, when you look at our internal service funds, such as fleet and equipment, information technology, and property management, there's a lot of items that we could have included in the carry forward that are multi-year projects. And we just put a stop on those. And we said, nope, if they're not going to get done in 2020, then they're not going in there. And so we held back on those and we said those will be considered as part of the next biennial budget process. Transportation, park, and sewer improvements, they are moving forward. The primary reason is really twofold. One is the bids have already been awarded, but most importantly, very, very limited numbers of general government funds, very limited general fund dollars in support of that. There's about $500,000 to $700,000 a year coming from our general fund. And so if we do need to bring that back into our general fund, we can do that very, very easily. The other is real estate excise tax. The housing market has slowed down. So it was pretty hot, but we have held some monies back in the real estate excise tax fund to ensure that we can pay our debt service, not just this year, but as we look out into 21 and 22 as well. Also, we have very, very strong reserves. We ended the year in a very strong position. But at the same time, those reserves can go very, very quickly. The financial challenges that we have, I do not anticipate just going away in 2020. They are going to continue into 21 and 22, which means those reserves may be needed to help with that as well. But at the very least, we have that 3.2 million of unreserved, undesignated fund balance that typically we would be rolling into the next biennium to build more transportation projects or park projects or something like that. But right now we have that in place to help bridge the gap over the next month or so as we kind of figure out what we need to do here. I'm going to be completely frank on this next one. It is very likely that there will be a reduction and or elimination of services that the city's currently providing or has provided in the past. What those are going to be and what that's going to look like is still to be determined. But at the end of the day, what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with math. And if the revenues aren't coming in and we don't anticipate them coming in anytime soon, we just can't expect the reserves to hold everything together. Something's going to have to give. Also, we'll be looking at, I just mentioned, the reduction or elimination of capital improvement projects. That's probably not so much a 2020 issue as it is a 21 or a 22 issue. and having to pull back any contributions that we had anticipated to make from our general fund to either parks or transportation. Also, you know, the whole, given as large as it is, you know, quite frankly, it would be catastrophic if we had to balance the budget based on, you know, a loss of revenue of 15 or 20%. You know, that would be catastrophic. The fact of the matter is that the city of Lakewood, as well as all cities and municipalities, we're going to need some assistance from the federal government. You know, thus far, the federal government has been very good in addressing, you know, unemployment and assistance for just individual citizens. And of course, you know, huge financial packages for business assistance. There has been some money that has come down through the CARES Act to local governments. However, there's two issues with that. The first is that the threshold of population in terms of who gets the money is 500,000 people. So that means in Washington state, the state of Washington received $1.6 billion. Pierce County received $158 million. And then the only city that has received money directly is Seattle. The second challenge with the use of those monies is while they can be used for essential governmental services, they cannot be used for expenditures that have either already been adopted and budgeted for, or more importantly, to backfill any lost revenue. That is a congressional decision that came from Congress and is flowing through the Treasury Department. On a number of fronts, we are working with a number of our partners to try and get Congress to change that. To date, nobody has been successful in doing that. However, we learned today that Governor Inslee, he is going to be sharing a portion of the state's $1.6 billion with local governments with a population under 500,000, which equates to about $300 million. Counties are going to get a minimum of $250,000 and cities will get a minimum of $25,000. However, we got some information late this afternoon that the distribution to cities is going to be potentially based on a per capita methodology, and that per capita amount will be $25. So that would equate to about $1.5 million to the city of Lakewood. That would certainly help. But again, the downside to that is that the monies can only be used for new costs. It can't be used to backfill anything that we have lost to date. So we're going to be working with our state partners as well as the Treasury Department to try and figure out how we can best utilize those monies to help fill our financial gap. At the end of the day, really our hope is on another CARES Act economic stimulus package dedicated specifically for local governments here in Washington state, including our own Congressman Denny Heck. Our federal delegation strongly supports that and has been an advocate for that for a number of weeks, if not a couple of months now. We have been told on a number of occasions that the next stimulus package, which they're calling 4.0, they call the last one 3.5, is going to include assistance for local governments, including the ability that those dollars would be able to backfill lost revenue. The challenge with that is it hasn't happened yet, and we don't know when and if it's going to happen, which means that we need to plan that that money's not going to be here. We at least need to go be diligent in our efforts to plan accordingly. I mentioned the state money, the $300 million coming from the state. Pierce County has also received $158 million. I've had conversations with our county council member, Doug Richardson, as well as a couple of other folks regarding how those monies are going to be distributed. Councilmember Richardson did state last week that they're going to be looking to use those funds in support of, additional public health costs that are going to need to be incurred, all the testing that needs to occur. Also helping out with, business assistance, continuing that. And then also community resilience and support, like, for example, our nonprofits, our food banks, things along those lines. And then the fourth area would again be essential government services, but again, the same challenge exists. It can't be used to backfill lost revenue. So that's where we are with the numbers. The other thing too, I think, is to keep in mind is that even when the economy does begin to improve, local governments, we lag behind a little bit. And so it'll be, we'll probably have to experience this downturn a little bit longer than most. And that's just the way it works, or that's the way it's worked in previous economic downturns. The last thing I'd like to end with, and again, this is my perspective of looking at things as the glass is being half full as opposed to half empty, is that we need to keep in mind that this current economic downturn was not caused by bad economics. It wasn't caused by the housing crisis. It wasn't, the economy was very, very strong, and particularly the economy in the South Puget Sound and in Western Washington as a whole, and Washington State as a whole, was very, very strong. So I'm actually optimistic, a little bit cautiously optimistic, that when it does come back, it is going to come roaring back, and we're not going to have to wait, a year or 2 years or anything along those lines. Now we're going to plan for that to see what that looks like. But I think that there's still a lot of pent up demand out there for people to get back to work and to get things going. Deputy Mayor Whalen mentioned earlier, and this is a good indicator, our current development services activity. So yeah, development services activity between January 1st and April 24th, last Friday of this year, was pretty healthy. Now, compared to the same period last year, it's down about 20-25%. However, compared to previous years, it's up. So it's taken a little bit of a dip, and that dip has actually occurred only in the last 2 weeks. Up until that point in time, it was very, very busy. So, we're hopeful that again, by the governor opening up construction the other day, that we'll see more of an uptick on that as well, because I think that's a good indicator of how things are out there in terms of consumer confidence, but just the feeling of people wanting to get out there and make some things happen from an economic development standpoint. So, and then also, what Congress has done, the 2.2 trillion plus another 500 billion, that's almost $3 trillion that they've invested into the economy. That represents well over 10% of our national GDP, which is huge. So that's kind of holding our national economy up right now, and hopefully that will continue until we can be back open for business 100%. But at the end of the day, for the city of Lakewood and many other cities, we are going to need some kind of financial assistance with the future stimulus. So that's where we are, and more to come probably in the next 2 weeks.
Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you. I just had one clarifying question regarding the comment about the ability of persons to delay property taxes. And delay is the right word. They're not being forgiven. Is that right?
That's correct, Councilmember.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, how many vacancies do you currently have?
We have a couple, literally a handful, maybe 4 or 5. And then we have 2 conditional offers out on a couple of police officers, but those are conditional. We haven't made them permanent or made the final job offer yet. Obviously, those are all on hold.
Okay. So are they all general fund or some of them outside the general fund?
Actually, yeah, they're all general fund.
Okay.
But not many. I think like I said, 4 or 5 positions, not a lot, not a lot, Councilmember.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Caulfield. We'll now move to council comments. Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say that through various means of communication with folks in the community, people are actually impatiently optimistic. They really think that they can get moving back and that get their life back to where it was before. Even some folks that are affiliated with some of our lower income neighborhoods, they are actually overall, when they consider the contributions from the federal government through either stimulus dollars, or many of them are drawing the various unemployment things, they're not finding themselves sinking rapidly and are, thinking that they're going to be good. So I think that that's speaks well for how the community is going, and supports the city manager's glass half full philosophy. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would like to build on what Councilmember Brandstetter said about impatient optimism. And I was reminded of a skit on Saturday Night Live that I saw with Brad Pitt, in which he made a very nice tip of the hat to Dr. Fauci and some of what's been going on in the country. So I would recommend that you take a look. As far as optimism, after watching that, you will be. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just briefly, I just wanted to say that I was going through our legacy plan and I was noticing all the projects that we had been working on and the things that we had accomplished. And I thought, gee, we would be in great shape if it wasn't for COVID-19. So Mr. Caulfield, thanks for dampening my thoughts, but we have to be realistic. We're still going to be fine. I am very optimistic that things are going to turn around and we're going to be fine. Other than that, it's good to see everybody and thank you very much.
Ms. Farmer.
So I don't know if anybody has been in the Oak Brook neighborhood recently, and I know it's usually Paul's thing to talk about our road construction, but I had to point out that there's this giant rock pile on the corner of Onyx and Phillips. And it's hilarious because at least 3 times I saw pickup trucks and vans kind of surreptitiously pull up and stuff a couple rocks, heft a couple rocks in the back of their vehicles and drive away. And so they were really excited that they could, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So there you go. That was fun. I have really enjoyed that our parks are open for the trails and the open spaces and the walking. And I have seen so many smiles and so many friendly, people making wide berths and making sure that they're social distancing. And I talked past a lady today who said, oh my gosh, this is just amazing. I'm so glad the parks are open now. I feel so much better. So thank you for that. That's just been, I see it in the folks here. They're really enjoying it. I had a chance to participate in part of the Military and Civilian Services Summit where Deputy Mayor Whalen gave part of the opening. And that was really interesting. And I'm really pleased that they were able to pull that together. A lot of people and a lot of effort went into making that online. So that was really interesting to to see the connections between the military community and Lakewood, and all of the things that are coming up and coming together, given everything that's going on. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this is tough because my day job, we're trying to also figure out what to do, and but we will get through this, because I think fundamentally the city is sound. I think we saw that tonight in the financial report, that this we have just done a really great job, and staff really kudos to really keeping costs under control throughout the organization. I just on the good news side, we get those reports. I think we all get the daily reports on COVID, and the highest number of new cases in one day was 80, and that was the 1st of April. And yesterday was 28. And if I take my pencil and I went from that 80, it's like about like this on the downhill slope. So we're getting there. It'll be a little while yet. And the good news is yesterday nobody passed away. So we're getting there, and folks just have to be patient, and we'll get through this, and hopefully things will turn around. So, and fairly quickly, but I think we've built a good foundation, and we'll get there. So thanks.
Mr. Whalen.
Well, thank you. We had, despite the social distance approach to all things business and community, we did attend the Military and Civilian Services Summit, as Councilmember Farmer noted. It sounds like it went pretty well. It would be great to get some feedback to determine really how many participants had a chance to dial into that. I think the information presented was fantastic. I stayed in for most of it. There was a commentary and presentations made by the head of Madigan, talking about their approach to the COVID issue, and certainly Colonel Duncan, the garrison commander, provided a lot of helpful information as well. So it was a good event. I also attended the EDB board meeting that was held on Friday. We do these once a quarter. Of course, this time was a little different, being a Zoom meeting, but we heard a lot from the business folks in the room. And I typically attend the EDB's briefing at least once or twice a week. We had Denny Heck this last meeting that kind of spoke about the new PPP program that was just passed by Congress, and the doors opened up today at 10:30 for the additional loan applications for that program. So hopefully the spigots are opening up and things are moving forward. I want to echo my comments about the work that the city has taken to reopen the parks with a responsible manner. There's been a lot of goodwill generated as a result of that. We hear good feedback and appreciation for that as well. I would, since I have not been out to Wagup Lake, it would be great to get a little feedback as to how the treatment has progressed. I hear somewhat good things about that. I don't hear anything negative about it, except for maybe one or two people. But I assume that treatment plan went off without a hitch. And then finally, in terms of the overall business climate here in Lakewood, it would be interesting to know whether Becky Newton or the city manager or Mr. Buer are hearing information back from our businesses in town as to how they're doing, whether some of them or many of them are getting funds through the PPP program or the county's program. You know, if we had the chance to do some BRE visits over the phone to check in and see how they're doing, check the pulse, that would be a great thing to do. Let them know that we're here for them. If there is a need for help on any of those phone calls, I would be happy to participate with Becky or whomever at the city. If we could get a list of businesses to call and just check in with them and see how they're doing, I think that would probably be much appreciated by our business community, especially the small businesses and some of the nonprofits. And speaking of nonprofits, I'm happy to say that Lakewood Gardens did get a PPP loan from Commencement Bank, or through Commencement Bank. So they are very appreciative of that and are looking forward to kind of gearing up for hopefully a better spring and summer for the gardens out there. And that is all I have, except to express appreciation for our city manager who always continues to look sharp. I want to know, where he's getting his haircut so I can come by and get sheared at some point, because it's looking good there, John. You're looking good.
You know what? It's my wife. It's all my wife. And so guess what? You're not on the list.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you.
Actually, we can work something out. We can work something out.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I don't have much to lose.
Look at me.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I'm suffering from too much. Somebody's got to do it. I would echo the comments regarding the parks. I went out to Sports Silicon Park to check it out, probably 5:30 to 6. One of the pleasantly surprising things, it looked like throughout the park, people were parked every other parking spot. They were distancing their cars. People are making a real conscious effort to be responsible and seem to be having a good time. So that was great to see. Kind of on the downside of aid, I think realistically, city manager has commented on all the restrictions on the current CARES money. Can't supplant, has to be directly related to expense. Addressing the COVID virus, I don't think there's going to be any city money, at least nothing meaningful coming out of the county's allocation. When we get to the money coming from the state or CARES 4, I think we really need to look closely at how we can fill in the gaps that will exist in Lakewood, instead of starting from the proposition that these are really good things to give the money to. The things that seem to attract money are food, homelessness, and unemployment benefits. But the unemployment benefits run out, and those people have to sustain themselves so that they homeless and need the food. So I think we have to look hard at how we can use the monies that we do get to backfill the need that exists in our own community and be pretty nimble doing that. And for a last point, I'd like to say we think we have great help doing that. We're extremely fortunate to have Mr. Caulfield and Ms. Krause, who I consider municipal finance wizards. Other places aren't so lucky, and they're going to hurt. We're in remarkably good shape for being in the middle of a financial disaster. And so I'd like to thank those two for the great work that they do, and raise expectations for even better work in the future. So is there anything else anyone has? Well, then thank you very much. We're adjourned.